Welcome back. You're here for the deep dive, looking for those aha moments, right?
Mhm.
Today, we're getting into something pretty personal, often a bit puzzling. The details of female sexual response.
Yeah, and we're looking at it through the lens of some specific writings, David Shade's articles from OUI magazine, actually.
Right, using NLP to slip in the back door, that's one. And the main one for today, the deep spot.
Exactly. So these are from back in 2000. Shade's sharing his personal take, his observations, techniques he developed.
Focused on, well, two different things, really. Anal sex introduction in one, and then vaginal orgasms via this deep spot in the other.
And it's key to remember, this is his experience, his understanding from that time.
Absolutely. So our mission, our goal for this dive is to really unpack Shade's ideas. Arousal, orgasm, the anatomical claims he makes, the
We're
methods.
going deep, not just scratching the surface.
Okay, so let's start there. The deep spot. Sounds intriguing. What exactly does Shade say he discovered? How did that happen?
Well, the story he tells is pretty interesting. He was apparently working with a woman, early 20s, who'd never had an orgasm.
Never.
Right. And he says, standard approaches, intercourse, even what he called face fuck, hadn't worked for her.
So he decided to try something else.
Yeah, more direct manual exploration. He looked for the G-spot first, apparently, but didn't get the results he expected.
Right.
So then he says he inserted his middle finger, like as deep as he could go, focusing on the front wall of the vagina.
Okay, going deeper. And what did he find way back there? Anything different?
That's where it gets interesting. He reported that the inner dimensions seemed to expand at that depth.
Expand.
Yeah. And the texture changed, too, from what he called spongy to something smoother, firmer, with these subtle horizontal ridges.
Okay, ridges. And did he describe a specific technique for that area?
He did. Very specific. He called it a come-hither motion with his finger.
Come hither, like curling the finger.
Exactly. Curling the tip, pressing firmly against those ridges, and then gently pulling downwards.
Firm pressure, pulling down.
Yeah.
And the woman's reaction, you said she'd never orgasmed before.
Well, according to Shade, the response was immediate and powerful.
Really?
Yeah, he says after just a few minutes of that specific stimulation, she had her first orgasm ever.
Wow. That's quite something.
He describes her being surprised, then affectionate. He frames it as, a really pivotal moment for her sexuality.
And did he say if it helped her long term? Like beyond that one time?
Yes, he actually mentions that afterwards she became able to orgasm in, well, various ways.
Huh. So a potential breakthrough for her. But was this just a one-off, or did he find it worked with others? Did he test this deep spot idea more?
He did. And this is where he starts to see it as maybe a more general thing. He talks about another partner.
Okay, different situation.
Yeah, this woman had orgasm before, but only through direct, continuous clitoral stimulation. Very familiar with that, but apparently not vaginal orgasms.
Right, so a completely different baseline experience. What happened when he tried the deep spot technique with her?
He claims that within minutes of stimulating that area, she cried out, saying she was close to an orgasm unlike any she'd had, a vaginal orgasm.
So she recognized it as different immediately.
That's what he reports, yeah. He even quotes her expressing, surprise and pleasure.
Okay. And did that translate to intercourse for her? Because that's often the goal people talk about.
He goes on to say yes, that over time, with repeated stimulation of this deep spot in the vaginal wall, across several encounters, she eventually started having orgasms during intercourse, too.
That's quite a claim, then, that stimulating this one area could potentially bridge that gap for someone. Now, he tried to give it an anatomical basis, too, didn't he? Mentioning Gray's Anatomy.
He did, yeah. He tried to connect this deep spot feeling to what Gray's Anatomy calls the cavity of the cervix.
The cavity of the cervix. How did he explain that connection?
He used this analogy, which is actually quite helpful, I think. Imagine holding a Frisbee upside down.
Okay, like the dome is facing up.
Right, and the cervix is pointing downwards, like the center point of that upside-down Frisbee. His point was that your fingertips, if you reached in, would be touching the inside edge of that Frisbee shape.
Ah, so the cavity is like that inner rim.
Exactly. And he emphasized that this whole inside edge, that rim, is supposedly particularly sensitive.
So the deep spot isn't maybe one tiny point like people sometimes think of the G-spot, but more like a sensitive zone connected to the cervix.
That seems to be exactly how he presented it. He suggests picturing that come-hither motion tracing along that inner edge of the upside-down Frisbee. It suggests a wider area, yeah, not just one specific little spot.
Okay, that makes more sense visually. So we have the initial discovery, the second partner's experience, this anatomical idea. But he went further into the details, didn't he? Talk about a tilt.
Yes, exactly. This is quite interesting. He observed that the uterus, and therefore this cavity of the cervix, isn't perfectly level inside the body. It's slightly tilted forward.
Tilted forward.
Yeah. So he brings back the Frisbee analogy. Imagine that upside-down Frisbee isn't flat, but tilted. Lower at the front, higher towards the back.
Okay, like it's slanting down towards the pubic bone.
Kind of, yeah. And this tilt, he argued, has big implications for how you best access that sensitive area.
Which leads to approaching from the back. Is that the idea?
Precisely.
Okay.
Because of that forward tilt, he suggested that entering from behind, maybe with the woman on her hands and knees, allows for deeper access to the back wall of the vagina.
Aiming towards the higher part of that tilted Frisbee rim.
You got it.
Mm.
And he claimed that stimulating this deeper back wall, sort of towards the tailbone, could create a sensation. Well, he said some women compared it to anal sex.
Really? That intense?
And could lead to exceptionally powerful orgasms. He even tells this story, this anecdote, about one woman having to actually hold on to the bathroom sink because the orgasm was so intense.
Wow. Okay, that's vivid.
Yeah.
He also mentioned needing firm pressure, right? Not just gentle touch.
Very much so. He's quite clear. Massage the deep spot firmly. He had a theory about why, too.
Which was?
He theorized that massaging the back part of the deep spot actually mimics the ballooning effect that happens naturally in that area during orgasm.
Okay.
And massaging any part of the deep spot, he suggested, simulates the muscle contractions involved in cervical dilation during orgasm.
So he's saying the stimulation itself kind of tricks the body or encourages the body.
Right. Leading to his pretty bold statement that orgasm becomes almost unavoidable if you do it correctly and firmly.
That is a strong claim. Now, another point he made was about sensitivity, wasn't it? Comparing it to the clitoris.
Yes, that's a key difference he highlighted. The clitoris, as many know, can get overly sensitive, even painfully so after a point.
Right. It can shut things down sometimes.
Exactly. He argued the deep spot doesn't have that limitation. It doesn't become painfully sensitive in the same way.
Meaning potentially longer orgasms or sustained stimulation.
That was his implication, yeah. That you could potentially continue stimulation for much longer, leading to more sustained orgasms. Plus, he noted, the natural muscle contractions continue after the peak anyway.
Interesting. Did he describe any other ways to stimulate it, besides the one finger or during intercourse from behind?
He did. For a woman lying face up on her back, he mentioned a two-finger technique.
2 fingers? How?
Using the index and middle fingers. Keep the tips about an inch apart, he said, and rub firmly against the front part of the deep spot, that lower edge of the tilted Frisbee.
Okay, so accessing the front rim that way. And then, wasn't there one he called the most powerful way, involving the back again?
Yes, he described what he considered the most potent method. It involves reaching the very deep back of the vagina.
Deeper still.
Yeah, and he noted that this area tends to pocket, or sort of form a cul-de-sac, when a woman is really aroused.
Right.
So the technique is press the tip of the middle finger right against the very back of that pocket.
Okay, deep pressure at the end point.
And at the same time, use the pad of that same finger to press downwards on the PC muscle.
The pubococcygeus muscle, the pelvic floor muscle.
Exactly, which he says will be contracting intensely at this point. He describes the sensation from this as incredibly powerful.
How powerful.
Well, he suggested it might feel like the contracting PC muscle could actually break your finger. Obviously hyperbole, but it conveys the intensity he was describing.
So it's this combination of deep, targeted pressure and engaging those strong pelvic floor muscles. He clearly thought this was a major key.
It certainly seems that way from his writing.
Okay. Now, we also mentioned that other article title at the start, using NLP to slip in the back door. Our focus has been the deep spot, but just briefly, what was that one about?
Right. That second article, and he mentioned that's covered more in his book, was about using neuro-linguistic programming, NLP techniques,
For what purpose?
as a way to help introduce a partner to anal sex, making them more comfortable, more open to the idea and the experience.
Ah, okay. So more about the communication and psychological side of approaching that specific activity.
Exactly. Navigating the conversation, the mindset within the relationship. A different focus, but related to exploring different aspects of intimacy.
Got it. Okay, so as we kind of wrap up our dive into Shade's deep spot ideas, what are the main things listeners should take away?
Well, the core concepts from Shade are the sensitive zone, deep in the vagina, front and back walls, linked anatomically by him to the cervix cavity.
Right.
Then there are the specific techniques,
Mm.
the come-hither motion, using the body's natural tilt for different access points, like the posterior approach,
Mm-hmm.
and that intense, deep back wall stimulation combined with the PC muscle pressure.
And his big claim.
His central claim was that stimulating this area could trigger powerful vaginal orgasms, even for women who hadn't had them before, and that it avoids the oversensitivity issue of the clitoris, allowing for potentially more sustained pleasure.
Okay. And just to reiterate for everyone listening, it's really crucial to remember these are David Shade's observations, his techniques from his experiences back then.
Absolutely. His interpretation of anatomy, his results with specific partners.
And we know, I mean, individual bodies, individual responses, they vary hugely, don't they?
Massively. Which brings up, something important to think about.
Yeah.
How do these individual variations, anatomical differences, past experiences, psychological factors,
Mm.
how might they change how someone experiences these techniques, or if they work at all?
That's a really good point. It's not a one-size-fits-all map.
Definitely not. And it underlines that really exploring different kinds of intimacy and maybe most importantly, having open, honest communication with partners. That's still fundamental, isn't it?
Absolutely. It's all part of understanding the incredibly diverse ways sexual response can manifest. It's a continuous discovery.
For sure. On your own and together with others. Lots to think about there.